Okay, so we are going to start with a case scenario, which kind of makes it easier when problems arise to actually translate the actual issues to how do these various parts work together, whether they're legal or what do the agencies do. So we'll start with this scenario. It has some real life elements to it, and I'm sure most of you know of individuals who've had similar situations occur to them. So, that's right. Violet is alone at the age of 83, and I also have it on the screen. She is an 83-year-old vulnerable adult that is frail and suffering from mental limitations and forgetfulness. Violet shared a home for many years with her significant other, whom she called her husband. He has since passed away. Within the past few months, Miss Violet's home sold for reasons that she had forgotten. She must vacate within the next 2 weeks. Violet has no family and no local friends. She stated that her Social Security was cut off 6 months ago, and due to not having an open bank account, she has no income and only $10 to her name. A concerned individual called the Florida Abuse Hotline, and I'm going to give that number, 1-800-799-7233, and I'll just say it one more time, 1-800-799-7233, and a referral was made to the Department of Children and Services, DCF, in Broward County to the Adult Protective Services Unit. Once the Adult Protective Services Unit became involved, it was noticed that there was no food in the home, no funds available, and that Ms. Charlotte did not know where she was going to move. The money from the sale of the home was actually given to Ms. Violet. She received a check for $150,000 and attempted to deposit the money in another person's account because her accounts were closed due to reasons that she did not understand. And we'll get into this a little bit during the scenario, but quite often banks will shut down accounts for individuals when there's a lot of unauthorized activity. To read it from there. During the conversation that Charlotte had with the individual from the Adult Protective Services Agency, she informed them that after her husband's funeral, her significant other, that she received a call from someone named Dan, who stated that he was with Publishers Clearinghouse. Dan was actually not with Publishers Clearinghouse. And that her significant other had won $15 million, and that all she had to do was pay transfer fees and the taxes. She stated that over the past 2 years, she had been paying off those fees. She could not provide an amount that she needed to pay, the amount that she already paid, or any information as to how to contact this Dan. She had a friend located in Illinois whom she could not name or provide an address that had opened a bank account to assist her with paying these bills, including to Dan, because the banks have all closed her accounts. A month or so later, due to the efforts of the Adult Protective Services, an emergency temporary guardianship was granted, or ETG. As the judge agreed, the guardian over finances would stop the exploitation. The guardian would be able to open a bank account under the guardianship name, get the Social Security reinstated, have her bills paid, and she would then have access to the $150,000 from the sale of her home. A referral had been actually made to the Area Agency on Aging while they were looking for placement for Miss Violet in an assisted living facility because she no longer had her home. The application for Medicaid long-term care was approved. While the guardian assisted Violet with her move, a statement for an old individual retirement account, or IRA, was found in her belongings. Violet stated that Dan connected her with one of his friends. He invited her to a wonderful lunch with other friends, and there was pressure afterwards to utilize this advisor who appears not to be registered or licensed. Violet is not concerned because he promised to triple her money. So that is our scenario for this morning, and we'll get to the experts on these various areas as to what happened here or how to best handle a situation such as this. One of the things that comes to mind whenever I see a scenario like this is, how do you avoid it? So I'm actually going to start with Stephanie Schneider, who is the elder law attorney on this panel, and ask her, Stephanie, in which ways could Violet have avoided a guardianship?
That's a great question. So one of the things that's important for all of us to do as adults over the age of 18 is not wait. Not wait for some magic age at which we think we should go to the attorney and have documents prepared. Especially for all of you who are here today in the role as caregivers, we tend to want to put all our energy and focus on the person we're caregiving for, right? And many times we put our own needs aside. So I want to encourage everybody today who's here to go to a qualified elder law attorney. Talk to them about having a durable power of attorney put in place for you. Even though it may be too late for the person you're caring for, they may not have the mental ability to understand what they would be signing. It's important for all of you to plan ahead. So the power of attorney will allow you to give somebody you trust permission to make financial decisions for you should you ever have an illness or become incapacitated. And as Denise is asking, that would allow you down the road to avoid a court guardianship. It means your life and your decisions will stay private and confidential. The other document that would have been helpful for Violet to have in place is called a designation of healthcare surrogate. It's a fancy way of saying somebody who's going to be your medical advocate, who will have permission to speak with doctors. If they're concerned about the care that you're getting, they can have you moved to a different hospital or ask for a second opinion. And they can hire a home health agency to come into the home to care for you. Again, what's very important about these two documents is you're giving somebody you trust permission to make these decisions, and you're not putting yourself in the court system. So your life is remaining private.
Thank you. Deborah, would you let us know, or would you describe what Adult Protective Services does when it actually goes out to investigate?
Sure. So Adult Protective Services is part of Department of Children and Families, and our job is to stop reoccurrence of abuse, neglect, exploitation, and self-neglect in the vulnerable adult population. So anyone 18 or over who has a long-term mental, physical, or developmental disability, sensory disability. So what happens is 415 is an administrative statute which gives us permission to go in the home. We don't need warrants, we don't need special permission. However, if a vulnerable adult, when we go in there, we find out they have capacity to consent to DCF services, they could not allow us in. However, our job is to make sure all the vulnerable adults who lack capacity to consent are protected. In the case of Miss Violet, it came in as a self-neglect case, as an 83-year-old who was about to be evicted from her home. To become homeless, it was our job to go in and make sure she was safe. She did lack capacity to consent, and DCF always starts off with least restrictive services. So what could we do to get her out of this situation? And the first thing we did is called a 415 Protective Services petition to get her a place to live when on the 31st of the month she was going to be kicked out. Originally, when she sold the home at the end of December, they gave her a whole month extension to find somewhere to live because they didn't understand she lacked capacity and had no way to solve her problems. So we came in, and that's when we had to start making referrals to help her have a way to pay. Just so you know, the state of Florida, which is DCF is part of, doesn't pay for any services, so we have to make the referrals. So we made referrals to ADRC for long-term care, for other types of assistance. I don't know.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. Um, How long are these services typically provided?
Okay, so the investigation itself is up to 45 days, in which we need to complete it. It could remain open if we have court action that is needed to be taken. Once we put the referral in through Department of Elder Affairs for services or through like Meals on Wheels, we had to help get her electric turned back on. We get her emergency food and try to set up for, longer lasting food. The services will go on forever once she's placed.
Okay. Stephanie, I'm going to go back to you for a minute because we talked about the emergency temporary guardianship. How exactly, can you give us the entire framework as to how this works? How it essentially, we know that APS was actually the one who instituted this proceeding, but once they're in, how does it actually work? How do they protect Violet and her assets?
Okay, great question, Denise. So what I do really goes hand in hand with what Adult Protective Services does. So they will start the process. A hearing will be held before a magistrate, but the magistrate will realize since Ms. Violet doesn't have power of attorney and she didn't sign a health care surrogate, that she needs further protection. She needs legal protection. So the magistrate will tell us, please file a petition for an emergency temporary guardian. And as it says, the word emergency means she's being self-neglectful, and so we want to stop that. We want to protect her. The emergency part means that a guardian will be put into place by the judge for up to 90 days. And the guardian's job is to stabilize Ms. Violet's situation, stop the exploitation from continuing, safeguard the monies that she still has, and get her protective housing where all her physical needs are going to be met. Now, because she has the cognitive impairment, it is too late to try to see if she can understand and sign those documents. So after 90 days, the emergency guardian will actually become a permanent guardianship for Miss Violet.
Okay. Adriana, in this scenario, a referral was made to the Area on Aging. And what are actually, with returns to Medicaid long-term care, what are the minimum eligibility requirements for this program?
Yes, the Area Agency on Aging in Broward County assists seniors over 60 and disabled adults over 18 to apply and complete the eligibility process for Medicaid long-term care program. In this case, we will receive the referral from the Department of Children and Families, APS, and we'll process the referral as a priority because these clients need assistance as soon as possible. Department of Children and Families will pay only for a few days of services, waiting for long-term care to kick in and cover the services indefinitely. So the minimum requirements to apply for Medicaid long-term care in Florida are being a Florida resident, being over 18 years of age, meet the citizenship criteria, so they either have to be an American citizen or legal resident, green card holder for at least 5 years, and have a social security number or have applied for one.
What are the income and asset limits?
To qualify for Medicaid long-term care, the individual monthly income should be under $2,829. For a married couple, the income limit is $5,658, and the liquid assets limit is $2,000 for a single individual and $3,000 for a married couple.
Okay. How long does the process typically take?
Well, it's different for each case. Depends of what is the situation and the priority. When an individual needs Medicaid long-term care services, they should contact the Area Agency on Aging. Our helpline will answer that call. We have train and prepare information and referral specialists that will screen the call. And if it's determined that Medicaid long-term care or any other funded program will benefit this individual, they will set up an appointment for a telephone assessment. That assessment will take about 45 minutes and will determine what's the priority for each person. After that, the individual is placed on the waiting list based on that priority. So the timeline is different for everybody because it's not first come, first serve. It's based on priority score. And after the funds are available and the person is selected from the waiting list to start the process, we have a new team of Medicaid benefit counselors that will assist with the eligibility process. The minimum income for an individual is $2,829 monthly income.
I'm sorry, once again, that's monthly.
Monthly.
So if it's under that amount, because I'm a caregiver, and with that, his income is about like $2,100 a month. So would that sort of fit into that?
Correct, yes. Keep in mind, it's gross income before any deductions. Normally, the Medicare Part B premium is deducted, so you have to add that to your net income. And if it's under 28, 29, it's meeting the criteria. Even if an individual in need of Medicaid long-term care services does not meet this income criteria, we still encourage them to apply if the services are needed, because there are several legal tools that can still qualify them for the program even though they don't meet these financial limits.
Okay, and I'm going to ask that we reserve time for questions after everyone on the panel has spoken. We're going to go now to Lisa, who is with the Security Exchange Commission, and we are thrilled to have somebody from the SEC here this morning. So, Lisa, would you describe the general role of the SEC and how it protects the public?
Thank you. I am an attorney with the United States Securities and Exchange Commission. We are a federal agency headquartered in Washington, D.C., and I work for the Miami Regional Office. Our mission is to protect investors. That's one of our missions. And we unfortunately bring a lot of cases where seniors are victims of fraud. This situation had a few touches on fraud against seniors, but we're talking about investment fraud, financial fraud specifically. So I have brought this book, A Guide for Seniors, Protect Yourself Against Investment Fraud. And the most important rule of thumb is if something sounds too good to be true, it usually is too good to be true. Seniors are more vulnerable. It's a different generation of, I hate to say it, like they're nicer people. They sometimes long for phone calls. I worked on a case where somebody called a senior citizen who was so happy to receive this phone call, and the person promised many things, like in our example with Violet. I'm suspicious of that guy, Dan, but we'll talk about him later. But, you know, somebody who's promising to triple your money, that's something to raise a red flag. And this advice is good advice, not only for caregivers, but for everyone in the room. You have to be suspicious. You have to ask a lot of questions. And sometimes seniors tend to be very polite. They don't want to offend anybody, but you must ask questions, because if not, you're going to lose your money. And then by the time the SEC gets the case, you know, the money's been spent. Whoever said they're going to triple your money, they're not, because that's, remember, too good to be true. So, you know, in this case, I'll give the example of the Publishers Clearinghouse. If you ever get an offer where you have to put money up front, do not do that. No matter if it's the Nigerian prince. I think we've all gotten some emails about that. You won, you inherited something. Do not send any money. Imagine if all of us send $100 a month to someone thinking that we're going to get a prize back. that's a lot of money that the fraudster is collecting, and you're never going to get your money. So as caregivers, do not allow the people that you help just give money away. The case that I worked on, it was an elderly lady on the west coast of Florida. She got the call. This guy said, Nana, and she says, I'm not your grandmother. Oh, you sound just like my Nana. I was calling her to tell her about this great opportunity, and this woman is lonely. So she's thrilled to get this call. This sweet young man, fraudster, is wooing her and telling her if she invests some money, she can have money for her grandkids. And who doesn't want to make a little bit of extra money? Everyone in this room does. I would love to get a real opportunity at something like that, but you have to ask and check these things out. And as it turns out in the case that I worked on, before the guy was off the phone, FedEx was at the door picking up the check from Nana. And then it's difficult to get this person to testify in my case because she doesn't want her kids to know that she wrote a check to a perfect stranger who called her on the phone, because then they're going to say, you can't handle your money. So as caregivers, help the people you work for. Take this brochure. They're out in the front, and this is good advice not only for the people you care for, but for everyone in this room.
Lisa, I'm going to ask you just really quickly to kind of give a list of some of the more common red flags.
Okay, a free lunch is a good example, where somebody promises you, come to this free lunch, and a lot of people will go to these free lunches and they'll think that, I'm being polite, I got to stay and listen to whatever they're pitching, and then they feel like, well, I should invest because they gave me a free lobster. I don't even know if okay, is that better?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. She'll get it turned on. Okay, promises of high returns, like triple your money. Another would be, limited supply. I've only got X number of these things. Like the guy, he's calling his Nana to give her this tip. I've only got a couple. And then they make you feel like if you don't act now, you'll lose the chance, but you've got to stop. You've got to research, because that's how you become defrauded. You fall into this, all the lies that they're telling you. I've worked on cases where, they're this close to FDA approval on something, but you got to invest now so you can get in on the ground floor. Other things telling you that certain famous people have a particular investment. A script that I found at one broker dealer was, Warren Buffett has invested in this. So then you think, well, if Warren Buffett has invested, I should invest. We recently brought a case against Kim Kardashian. She was promoting a crypto stock. And if you hear somebody who's famous, who has a lot of money promoting something, you think the person themselves is an investor. But in Kim Kardashian's case, she was paid $150,000 to promote this stock. And what happened was we said, you did not disclose to people that you were a paid spokesperson. If somebody tells you, because I can say this is great, whatever, if you think Kim Kardashian is an investor, you might be more tempted to invest. If she says she's just being paid to do it, then you have to think twice. Is this a good investment for me? So we find her maybe $1 million, but to her that's nothing. But social media, you've got to be aware that people can say anything, people can write anything. Any glossy brochure can be created now. Now we're afraid of artificial intelligence, where you get calls from numbers that seem like yours, people that know things about you. So you just have to if you just remember one thing, if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is, then you are safe. People get a little bit greedy because I want to get that winning lotto number, but it's not true. And so you have to do research, and it's better to pass up on an opportunity than lose any money at all.
Okay. Stephanie, I want to, I think because of all these folks who came out so bright and early, to talk a little bit about tips that we can provide to people for what we kind of call in the industry the conversation, which is really about how do you coax your loved one into doing some planning so as to avoid a situation such as the one that Violet has found herself in.
Yeah. How many of you here with us today are caring for somebody that you feel can still understand what's happening? Just show of hands. A few hands? Okay. So how many of you, when, could have been 2 years ago, 5 years ago, you were with this person that you love or care for, whether they're a friend, a neighbor, or a loved one, and you noticed that something didn't quite seem right. It was a little bit off. Anybody have that feeling, that suspicion? Did you trust your suspicion? Did you say, well, maybe he'll get better, maybe I'm overreacting? I think the first place we start to have the conversation is trust your intuition. Trust that inner voice that is telling you you're seeing or you're hearing something that doesn't seem right. It seems out of character. That's the time, if not earlier, that we want to sit down and say, hey, can we talk? You know, I care very much about you. I love you. And I noticed this. Have you been noticing anything lately? Are you noticing maybe you're a little forgetful, you weren't sure where you put something, maybe you forgot an appointment, a doctor appointment that you were supposed to go to? Why don't we talk about who you would like to help you going forward? Somebody to help you stay on top of the medical appointments, somebody that can help you talk with the doctor, somebody that can help to make sure that you pay your bills on time. That's my first suggestion for how we approach the conversation. Now, one of the things Lisa said, I remember being very important, and she talked about that sometimes an older individual won't want to testify because they don't want their adult children to know that they were vulnerable. And so this is a very hard conversation to have, not just for us as the caregiver, but also for the person we're talking to. So realize it's like peeling the layers of an onion, meaning we're going to probably have to have more than one conversation. It might need to be in small doses, in baby steps. But we want to start by creating that foundation of trust, that we care, and we want them to be involved. We want them to participate as much as possible in making decisions that are going to affect them. After the first conversation, you might want to approach it again. Have you thought of who you'd like to help you? Who would that be? Why don't we go to an elder law attorney and ask that person for some ideas and find out what the next step is to put the documents into place so that you have the peace of mind knowing the people you trust are the ones who are going to be there to help you.
Debbie, you and I talked a little bit backstage, actually, about perceptions that people have about adult protective services. And I want you to talk a little bit more about your agency because I have actually personally had to utilize it for some clients. And I think that people do have some misconceptions. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So a few of the things that we had talked about is that adult protective services, our job is not to go into someone's house and pull them out right away. We don't do, when someone calls a report in, like say for instance, people who live in a condo with other people, just because they call a report in, we don't go and pull someone out. The first thing we do determine, like I said earlier, was if they have the capacity to consent to services. If they do have capacity to consent, we could leave them in a bad situation. And one of the things is the investigators bring out the police with them for multiple reasons. That's if it's a bad situation. We're not, the APS is not allowed, the investigators not allowed to pick anyone up off the floor. We're not allowed to drive someone to the hospital, either police or EMS have to do that. We also can't Baker Act people who might be in a bad situation or psychotic and can't make their decisions at the time and are at harm to themselves or others. So we bring law enforcement with us also for protection of the API because we never know what's going to happen. So we don't want people to think that just because the police come out, they've done something wrong. Like I said, it's for other reasons. They will do a criminal investigation, but the majority of our cases are not criminal, so no one's going to be arrested. Like I said, also when it comes to, for us, for APS doing abuse, neglect, exploitation, and self-neglect, we don't investigate the scam that's involved. That's a police matter. So in Miss Violet's case, the police have total control of who Dan from Publishers Clearinghouse is. It's their job to do anything related to that part of the investigation. Also, just so you know, well, in Broward County, we have 22 investigators, and we do have a big turnover. So when they do come to the home, make sure that you give them your first name and last name if they talk to you. Everything's kept confidential. We can't release the information to anybody. And also, like I said, we're just there to help the client to stop future abuse, neglect, or exploitation by any means that we could give, starting at the least restrictive, which could be trying to apply for services to get a paid caregiver in the home.
And what is the policy on reporters, so individuals who actually report seeing an incident?
So everyone in the state of Florida is considered a mandatory reporter. Reporter information, again, is confidential. The only people who are entitled to it is law enforcement and the state attorney, and that's to help with their criminal investigation. However, if you're calling for personal reasons, you can call and be an anonymous reporter. If you're a professional mandated reporter, like a doctor, a nurse, a judge, a banker, a teacher, a nurse, a doctor, they have to provide their first and last name while making a report. So, like a lot of this, we see more neglect in the county than we do exploitation. So say your loved one goes to a nursing home and you find out they're laying there in bed for so long and they get like a decubitus wound, you're gonna wanna call that in for us to investigate to see if they're getting the proper care in the nursing home, in the ALF. It could be in the hospital. And then we work with a lot of other agencies that do their part. So we have the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit, the Agency for Healthcare Administration, Long-Term Care Ombudsman. So they all work together with the same allegations to ensure that your loved one is safe.
Okay. Stephanie, Adriana alluded to it a little bit, and Adriana, I'm going to hold you back because I think you're actually going to get the most questions. To ways in which individuals can actually qualify for Medicaid long-term care in the event that they some of the other legal, I'll put it, mechanisms in place to do that.
So does everybody remember when Adriana was telling us that there is a gross income limit per month to qualify for Medicaid? And one of the things Denise said, and Adriana said, is even though somebody may have more than that, it's still important to plan and to apply. The reason is the person could still get Medicaid assistance, but they first need to work with an elder law attorney to create what is called a Medicaid income trust, so that the income above the limit will be put into a bank account and then used for their care. If that is done, they will meet the eligibility requirements. How many people here today are taking care of somebody that owns a home? Yes? Okay. So Florida has some wonderful protections when it comes to qualifying for Medicaid that we don't find in other parts of the country. And Florida will protect the home, which means a person can qualify even when they own a home. So what we don't want to see is people going on the internet for information or talking to a neighbor and getting misinformation and doing something like giving the home away to a relative, because if they do that, they will not qualify for Medicaid. What's important to do is get the proper guidance and advice first.
Okay. I'm going to now open this up for questions, and I hope you still have some, because I kind of held you a little bit back while we were talking. I can kind of start off again with Adriana, because I do think the long-term care is huge, because, of course, Medicare really doesn't provide it, or it's extremely limited what it does provide in terms of long-term care. So, Adriana, maybe just so that people have a general overview of the actual program itself.
Sure. The program will provide for seniors the minimum services to remain independent in the community if they're still in the community. In the community, we consider the house or an assisted living facility. So Medicaid has contract with different companies in the state to be the case managers, administrators, so they will coordinate and set up a care plan according to the needs. They will have an interview with the individual, their caregivers or family members, to discuss what's the best care plan for that particular person. So they will provide a few hours a week of personal care services, assistance with the activities of daily living, bathing, dressing, preparing light meals, medication management, medical transportation, etc. If the individual is placed in an assisted living facility, the Medicaid long-term care program will pay for part of the services, the personal care part. And if an individual moves to a nursing home, it will also assist with the fees of the nursing home. So the good thing about the Medicaid long-term care programs is that you can start at home with minimum services and then move through the different levels of care, and you can move the program with you.
Okay. Are there any questions? Okay. Oh, here.
Hi, good morning. I work for Elderly and Veteran Services. I just had a conversation yesterday with one of my clients in regards to the qualified income trust because her mother does make too much money for the program. But my understanding is, well, to get understanding, does that qualified income trust need to be in place prior to the application, or when she applies, is that when they start the process? Because only these will ask for 3 months of bank statements, but if they apply and they don't have that qualified income trust, then they wouldn't have the bank statements required.
That's a great question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to repeat it first, and then we're going to talk about it. The question was, she is in the process of helping somebody apply for Medicaid. The person's gross monthly income, as Adriana talked about, is above the limit. So she knows that this person needs the income trust, but when do you have to put it into place? So it needs to be done before the month of application. So let's talk about the steps. First, it is a legal document, so you do need to go to an experienced elder law attorney to write it. After it is signed, then it needs to be taken to a bank, and an account will be opened in the name of this trust. The next step that's very important is whatever amount is over that limit has to be deposited into this new bank account. But we don't just do it once, we have to do it every single month that the person is receiving the Medicaid. We cannot stop. We have to continue that. Another important thing, and don't throw tomatoes, okay? I'm just the messenger. We used to, in Florida, have retroactive Medicaid, which meant if somebody didn't know they were eligible and they didn't apply on time, they might get up to 3 months of retroactive Medicaid benefits. We no longer have that. So timing is very important. So let's use the month of May as an example. If you're going to apply someday in May, and you know the person that you're helping has too much income, we need that income trust established in May. The document needs to be signed in May, the bank account opened in May, and the proper amount of money put into the account in May. If you apply in May, but you don't do the income trust until June, you won't get eligibility for May.
Thank you very
Good morning.
I'll go to you and then you.
What I was wondering is, do you have any pamphlets for seniors that are homeless? I know several seniors that are living in their cars. And if it's not something that I would approach them with, but we converse and this and that, but the thing is, I was wondering if you had any pamphlets or something that I can give to them.
The question is whether we have any information or pamphlets for individuals that are homeless?
Yes.
Seniors.
Do you get your green bag when you register?
Did you get your green bag when you registered?
Should be some information. The number for the helpline should be there. You can give us a call and they can provide you with all the referral and resources available.
This was something that I wanted to give them so they can read it first before I do anything like that.
In the bag, you have a pamphlet with the agency information.
All right, I'll make a copy and give it to them.
Or we can provide you with another one. Who is over here?
Good morning. I have a question in regards to the Medicaid eligibility. So I have someone I'm working with. She's currently in skilled nursing, and she won't be going back home. She owns her condo outright, and right now they're telling her if she applies for the Medicaid, she can sell the condo after she gets the approval for the Medicaid. So I would like to get some clarification as to would that then disqualify her for Medicaid, because it's not in a trust. She just outright owns the condo.
Okay. Was everybody able to hear the question, or would you like it repeated? Okay, at least somebody's awake at this hour. The question was, she's assisting somebody who is in a skilled nursing facility, apply for long-term care Medicaid. She owns her condominium, and there's a question about possibly the time frame for selling it. Do I understand correctly? So remember a few minutes ago, I said that we do not count the value of the home. And when I use the word home, that could mean a condominium, it can mean a cooperative, a single-family home, a townhome, a villa. So the home is protected. We don't count the value. Now, once a person qualifies and they've been approved for Medicaid, if they were to sell the home, then the cash from the sale counts. And remember, Adriana shared with us, if it's a single individual, the limit is $2,000 resources. If it's a married couple applying, it's a combined resource limit of $3,000. So the sale after eligibility would cause the person to become ineligible. So there are ways to try to preserve those proceeds and maintain the eligibility.
So would she need to do that prior to them completing the application? Because the facility is helping her with the application. But so would she need to then maybe reach out to an attorney to have that taken care of prior to that application?
You know, without knowing all the facts of this individual, the best advice I can give is that she should get legal advice. And then that person will help her walk through the time frame and really what's the best planning option for her. You know, one of the things, I want to go back to Lisa because I love the tips that she gave all of us today. And we need to question what we're hearing and what we're being told. Whether it's from, if we're in the hospital and a social worker is saying you're going to lose your home, that is not correct information. So we have to go to the proper source to get the right advice and information.
Anyone else?
Oh,
Okay, so our criteria.
I'll repeat the question. What is DCF's competency when they go into an individual's home?
Yeah, so determining capacity to consent to DCF services. So we're doing an evaluation while we talk to the person, and the start of it is, are they oriented to person, place, and time? But are they also oriented to the situation that's going on? Can they make decisions and communicate their needs? Do they understand the consequences of the actions? Now, what happens is, in Broward, after we've determined it, if we feel the person lacks capacity and we have to go to court, we have another evaluator go out that's usually a licensed clinical social work, and they complete what's called the SLUMS, the St. Louis exam, to ensure if the person really does have that ability.
So if they lack capacity, do you go in right away and do something about it? Like, what are your steps?
Okay, so if a person does lack capacity, we have to determine first, is abuse, neglect, exploitation going on, and then what services would stop it. So like I said earlier, we're not pulling someone out of the house just because they lack capacity, but say, for instance, we find that they have a family member that maybe is local or not, like, I've had family members come from out of state, and then we've had family members consent to placement until they're able to arrive if they can't come right away. If they have no one in the area, if they have family in the area, we are gonna talk with them and say, look, this person either needs supervision, does someone have a power of attorney to work with the bank accounts? Like, what is already in place? If there's nothing in place, if it's medical, we're going to send them right to the hospital. If they lack capacity and we don't know if they've been taking their medications, if we have found some people lying on the ground, and sometimes it's not that they lack capacity because of dementia. Sometimes it could be something like a urinary tract that gives them delirium and it's short term. So we will have them reevaluated. So ours is not incapacitation by court, it's just they can't consent to our services.
Question back there?
Is there any mechanism that's in place to respond to people who have power of attorney, but those people are abusing it?
Okay, so again, that's for us. What will happen is, depending on how they're abusing their power of attorney, if it does fall under exploitation, we can investigate. The exploitation is when someone is in a position of trust and confidence, which that power of attorney would give, and they try to use, or they endeavor to use, the victim's funds for their own benefit. We are going to go out and we're going to investigate that. However, a lot of times the exploitation is criminal, so the cops may look at it, but there's a whole separate statute about power of attorneys and what the rights are to do with the power of attorney that DCF doesn't investigate. So that might be more criminal, or we might refer them sometimes to legal aid to get the help they might need to get that power of attorney revoked.
Okay, there's a question over here.
Yeah, can you go over the different types of legal guardians, professional guardians? I know the state also has available guardians for the indigent and family guardians.
Stephanie, you want to cover that?
Okay, I'm going to ask you to repeat. It sounded like there was two parts to that question. Was the first part the type of guardianships?
Yeah, the different types of guardians that are available. There's professional guardians. There's also guardians that are on the sliding scale. I think it's with the state of Florida for indigent people. And I think it's the public guardian is what they're considered. And then also family guardians and the different ways that they handle the loved ones' cases.
Okay. So my experience doing guardianships has been that the judges would prefer for family members to step forward and take on the responsibility to serve as a guardian for the person that is now incapacitated, whether they lack the ability to make informed medical decisions or they lack the ability to handle their finances. Now, distance, geographic distance, really is not a barrier to being a guardian. Why is that? Anybody want to take a guess? Well, technology, right? We all have cell phones now. We have email. We can get on a video conference. So even though, let's say, a parent might live in Florida and an adult child lives in California, they can still be the guardian. And we might suggest something like the child, because of the distance, would hire a care manager, somebody with a nursing or a social work background here in Florida, to help oversee the day-to-day care of the parent. So just to repeat, the courts do prefer family members to step forward. It doesn't mean that the courts will not appoint somebody else, but that is their first preference. Now, there can be situations where a person doesn't have living family. People have passed away, or maybe there are very distant relationships. In that situation, the judges will look to appoint what is called a professional guardian. This is somebody who has chosen to be a guardian as their career, as their job. And the court makes sure that they go through training, not just initially, but every year. In addition, both a family member guardian and a professional guardian have to go through a background investigation. So they are fingerprinted, and their fingerprints are sent not just to the FBI to run through their records, but also through the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. So the court takes great measure to make sure that the guardian that will be appointed is going to be the best person to care for the individual.
Sorry, that was our timer. Are there any more questions? And I'll take a couple more, and then I'm going to ask each one on our panel to kind of give their last tip before we
I have a question.
conclude.
I have a question.
Okay.
What if your spouse is in the nursing home and they're applying long-term skill care, and they're applying for Medicaid on his behalf? How does that affect your monthly, you have to give them your Social Security minus $160. How do you get till it's approved? Who's responsible for that part of his of the cost in in this long-term skilled nursing facility?
I'm sorry, all of us had a difficulty understanding the question.
My question is, if the skilled nursing facility is applying for Medicaid for my spouse, and who's responsible for the difference of the money? Since you say they don't go back 3 months, who's responsible for that until Medicaid is approved?
Can you try to hold the microphone
I'm sorry.
a little bit away? It's
Okay.
very hard to understand.
My question is, my husband's in a skilled nursing facility. They are applying for Medicaid. Who's responsible till Medicaid pays their share? I know he has to give his Social Security minus $160. Who's responsible for the difference of that until Medicaid is approved if it doesn't go back 3 months?
Okay, I think I understand it now. I'm going to repeat it. We have a married couple. One spouse needs long-term care. A Medicaid application is about or in the process of being filed. Until Department of Children and Families approves the application, who is responsible for paying the nursing home? It would be the resident's responsibility unless the nursing home is willing to allow the resident to just pay their income less the personal need allowance, which is the $160 a month.
Okay.
Question as it is a comment to Ms. Golden with the Adult Protective Services. And let me applaud you. Some years ago, as caregiver for my father and stepmother, both of whom had Alzheimer's. My father wandered, and my stepmother was considered negligent, but Adult Protective Services got involved, and as a result, when we applied for, they put us in touch with services that he could get. And I think that sometimes people are fearful of the fact that Adult Protective Services is going to try to take the parent or the child's rights away. Whereas in this case, again, I thank Adult Protective Services for helping my father get the at-home services that he needed. And he was bumped up from the bottom of the waiting list to the top. So again, I do appreciate the fact that that happened as a result of Adult Protective Services getting involved. And I thought I'd share that with everyone, because sometimes we're very fearful of Adult Protective Services, wherein it can be a valuable service to the client.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask Lisa. Okay, I have one more question, then I'm going to go to Lisa. One more question. Oh, I guess I have two more. Let's go ahead.
My question is to this young lady here. I don't remember your name.
Lisa.
Lisa. Lisa, my question is about fraud we were speaking about. And you had stated that if you have to pay a fee, then it's fraud. It's not really a...
Well, that's generally the situation. If you have to pay up front to receive your prize,
Right.
you need to question that.
Exactly. And what happened to me is that I'd gotten a letter stating that I had won all this money. And what they did to go around all that, they sent me a check for $4,000 that would pay for the taxes and the fee and all that kind of stuff. And it was a real check from a Bank of America. So is that a fraud where if I cash that check, then what's going on, that I owe them that money, that $4,000? Is that how they got around me paying the fee and I still owe them all this money?
Probably. Did you cash the check?
Oh, no.
Okay.
I still have that
Good.
check somewhere.
Well, I have another.
Like, people don't send money to people just
Right.
like that.
Exactly.
If it
So
sounds too good to be true,
then it's too good to be true.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Also, did you play the lottery, or do you have any idea who this actually happened to my father? And then I asked him, well, did you play the Irish lottery? No. Well, how are you going to win it? Go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, ladies. I found that it's quite costly to create a trust to qualify for Medicaid with the help of an elder care attorney. Is there any other way around that?
She finds that it's expensive to create a trust in order to qualify for Medicaid. Is there any way around it?
We're talking about the income trust? Is that what you mean? Yes, okay. The only other way legally that the Medicaid rules provide is that the income would need to go into what is called a pool trust. It's a little bit too much to share since we're about to end this session. But again, I would encourage everybody to get qualified legal advice as to what is best for your situation.
Okay. And Lisa, I'm going to ask you as we close to, leave the audience with some of your best advice and tips for avoiding fraud.
Well, go on our website, investor.gov. It gives a lot of examples of fraud, and I think that a good way to learn is hearing other people's situations, like Denise just mentioned. And that's a great point. Did you play the Irish lottery? Why would you be winning? So you learn from sharing experiences so that you don't become a victim. No one in this room thinks that they could become a victim, but let me tell you, these fraudsters are really, really good. They know how to get to you. They have comeback lines. For example, if a man says, oh, I have to talk to my wife about this investment opportunity, they have a comeback line Well, who makes the financial decision? Who wears the pants in your family? Which then the man might say, well, that's true, and she'll be so happy if I made $4,000, et cetera. So go on our website, investor.gov, that's specifically our investor website, and if you or anyone that you care for is solicited for an investment opportunity, we can't give investment advice like, listen, don't do that, don't invest in crypto, it's super risky. Do that, that sounds like a great opportunity. You can contact us at miami@sec.gov, and we can provide you with information so that you can make an informed investment decision. What's good for you is not necessarily good for you. But we cannot give financial advice, but what you want is to be able to make an informed investment decision, and the way you're going to do that is by getting information, by just not believing the representations that are made. Ask and check.
Thank you. Debbie?
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to give everyone the phone number for the abuse hotline. It's 1-800-96-ABUSE. It's an easy way. And just so you know, it is for both child abuse and vulnerable adult abuse. You just have to pick the option you're calling for. Also, if you do feel like, even though we talk mostly about financial, if you feel there is neglect going on, if anyone ends up in a facility, just make sure to call and talk with the hotline operators, just for us to go out and make sure, because sometimes we get reports when it's too late and someone's known that someone's been abused or neglected ongoing. And then what happens is sometimes the police feel that they're also at fault for that abuse or neglect because they never called to let anyone know. So don't wait till someone might be at the, where they're really severely hurt or they could be on their dying days. If you think abuse or neglect's happening, just call it in as soon as possible.
Stephanie?
My advice would be for those of you that are here and it's perhaps early in the stage of the person you're caring for, encourage the conversation. Remember, compassion, empathy, and respect go a long way. And remember, as caregivers, to also take care of your own legal needs as well, no matter what your age is.
Adriana?
Please call the area agency on aging if your loved one or anyone that you know is in need of services. We will talk to you and guide you the best possible.